So Mike, I recently had a case that I was looking at for a family that came in, and when they walked through our door for their free consultation, they told me that their daughter had been killed in a one-car accident. She was only 15 years old. And the insurance company that covered the car she was riding in had already contacted them, told them that it was a minimum limits policy, which means just $30,000, and they would be willing to go ahead and pay them that policy right now without any involvement from a lawyer or anything else for a full and complete settlement of all claims arising from the wreck. In other words, this is it. This is everything. And they didn't feel comfortable with that because their daughter had died. And so they came in to visit us, and I sat down and talked to them about it, and I said, well, there are lots of other policies that could possibly apply here, given the facts that you've laid out to me about your relationship with the person who was driving, that person's relationship with their family. There are other policies that could provide for this. And what I did was I agreed that we would represent them to investigate that claim on the agreement that if we didn't find any other policy other than the one that had been offered to them, we wouldn't charge them any fee whatsoever, that we would only charge a fee on things that we found. And if we didn't find anything new, then thank you for letting us at least try, right? And so I started digging into this thing. I want to tell you a little bit about the facts of it because I want to see your thoughts on it. So
this is sounding familiar, but I can't remember the exact name of the case, but go ahead.
Yeah, I want to tell you about it a little bit. So the actual facts were the young lady who passed away in this accident, she was riding with her older cousin, okay? And her older cousin lost control of the car. It was a complete accident. And the older cousin lived with her mother. Her mother and father were divorced. She was riding in and driving a car that was owned by her mother's boyfriend.
Oh wow! I'm gonna need to get a pen and paper. Okay, but go ahead.
And the older cousin was divorced and she was not divorced. She was separated from her husband, and they had been living apart for a year. She had moved back home to her mother, but she had never gotten an actual divorce from her husband. The young lady who passed away was 15, and her parents were divorced, and they had joint custody over her.
Okay.
Now, I can tell by the look on your face, you know good and well that why I said, look, we need to look into this. The insurance company that they had talked to, who had offered to just make this thing settle fast, no reason to have a lawyer involved, had not even told them the fact that there could be multiple other policies that would cover the accident. So, as you can imagine, the first thing that I did was I looked at my own clients' insurance policies because it was their daughter that passed away. And sure enough, both the mother and the father, because remember they're divorced, each had their own auto policy that had underinsured motorist coverage.
Okay. Well, I wasn't going to miss that one.
Now, I know you weren't. No, I know. But they both covered. They would both cover, and both insurance companies were glad to pay once someone called them and knew what to ask.
Absolutely.
You've run into that lots of times, haven't you?
I have. I'm going to take a shot at this. I may have to ask for a refresher on some of the facts because I wasn't writing this down. But the young lady, you've already told me, the young lady that passed away, her parents had an insurance policy themselves, and that's covered with the underinsured motors. Okay. The young lady that was driving a borrowed vehicle.
Correct.
Okay. She might have had her own insurance policy on her own vehicle. Did she?
She did, and it covered.
Okay. There's one. She might. You said she was young. So
she was 19.
19 was she, and she was living with her mother.
Correct.
Her mother, she would be a household member of her mother, and her mother's insurance might apply.
And it did.
Okay. Then, okay, I'm trying to remember the other facts. She was
from her mother and father are divorced.
Her mother and father are divorced. That was going to be my next question. Because her parents are divorced, she could still be considered a household member of her dad, or she could be a listed driver on her dad's policy. Was she? She
was considered a household member of her father, and her father's insurance policy also covered her.
Okay. So how many policies are we up to so far?
So we have the two from my clients because they each had their own separate one, the mother and father. And then we have the car she was driving's policy. That was her mother's boyfriend's car.
And her own policy.
That was one that had already tendered. Her own policy had already tendered.
So that's 4.
So that's 4. And then we have her mother, the driver's mother, and the driver's father's policies all covered.
So that's 6 so far.
That's 6.
Okay.
And there's one more.
And there's one more in a fact that I cannot remember. Can you give me a hint?
Yep, she's married and separated from her husband.
Oh, you did tell me that. Okay, well, she's married, separated from her husband, non-divorced. Right. That means she is still a household member of her husband, and her husband's, lots of times when people get separated, the first thing they do is get their own insurance policy. Right. Because they don't want to be on the same policy as their person that they're getting a divorce from.
It's actually better than that. So her husband's policy, like a lot of auto policies in Texas, said that it provides liability coverage for your spouse during a time of separation. So it literally spelled out these facts, the policy itself did. So it wasn't that she was a household member because of her husband, because she was a household member of her mother and father.
That's right.
It was that she was a spouse during a time of separation, and so it provided coverage for her. He was not happy about that, as you can imagine.
I can imagine. And you have to look at insurance policies more these days, a lot more than you did, say, I think it was 10 years ago. Yeah, we had, 10 years ago, there was one insurance policy, a foreign policy in Texas, and every insurance company sold the same policy. Now there's about 145, 150
there's a bunch of forms.
Different approved insurance forms, and you have to know what to go look for. A very common definition is an insured is defined as you and a household member or your spouse. And in this case, the spouse coverage was extended. Right. So that gets, if I'm counting right, 7.
Yes,
total policies.
And that's how many there were total. So the first insurance policy that had said, look, we'll settle with you right now for our full policy and be done. You don't need a lawyer. If they had listened to that, that would have been it, and they would have been done, because that would have wiped out everything other than my client's 2 underinsured motorist policies. But their insurance company had not even told them they had that coverage, had not even offered it to them when they called them and told them about the wreck. And so they ended up getting an additional 6 policies that had not even been offered to them. No one had even told them about, just for coming in and seeing us.